So look, yes, originally there was supposed to be a subscribe joke here, but this image of Killua covered in YouTube subscribe buttons took me so long to make that I'm just gonna take a step back this time around and let the image speak for itself. Hello and welcome to the New World Review, your source for everything anime and manga, and today it's back to Hunter x Hunter and time to discuss the past, the present, and future of a certain best boy, being Killua's Oldic. And I wanted to get into this because a while ago I made a very similar video featuring Gon, exploring what happened to him after the Chimera Ant arc, as well as his potential future in the series, and I even questioned whether or not I think he should indeed step back into the story, or if his character arc was satisfactorily concluded. There will be a link to said video in the description below if you would like to watch it, and I recommend you do because, I don't know, just do it. But all of these questions and more can also be applied to Killua. And not only that, but at face value these questions are even a bit harder to answer with Killua, as he can be seen as being left in something of a limbo state, and the arguments for both his continued involvement as well as his continued absence are pretty compelling. But to really dive into the heart of this issue, we need to understand where Killua was approaching his series journey from. Killua's purpose in Hunter x Hunter is probably the most vague of our main protagonists. You know, you can look at Gon and that's easy. He is on a mission to find his father, a nice tangible goal, and he has a clear yes or no answer when we think of whether or not he achieved it. And in this case, it would be a yes. Gon found Jing, and that is the primary argument as to why his character is complete. Similarly, you can look at Kurapika, who has another tangible goal, which is to recover the eyes of the Kurt clan members. Another super clear ambition. Does Kurapika have all of the eyes yet? Yes or no? And no, he doesn't, so his story will continue, hopefully. Then we can look at Leorio, whose goal was to make a ton of money and become a doctor so that he can treat people in need. Has Leorio become a doctor yet? No, he hasn't. So just as with Kurapika, his story continues, albeit very much in the background. But what is Killua's goal or purpose in Hunter x Hunter? His journey is much more complex than the more palpable goals of the other protagonists, and that's because he acts as something of an antithesis to the others, because his lack of purpose is, paradoxically enough, his purpose. The other three all have an innate sense of what their lives are meant to be dedicated to, and so they strive towards that. Meanwhile, Killua has been told all his life what he is supposed to be, which is an assassin. And his involvement in the beginning of the series can basically be summed up as, nope, I'm gonna go and play with my friends instead. F you, Dad. And what occurs from here is Killua's search for a goal and or purpose, which results in his priorities changing as the series goes on. But for most of it, you can probably identify his purpose as wanting to protect and spend time with his first and best friend, Mr. Gon. And yes, it's definitely much more complicated than that, because Killua comes with a lot of baggage in regards to the Zoldyck family, and him emancipating himself from his relatives is another undeniable driving force, particularly in the case of Illumi. However, with all of that in mind, the first and most obvious question we need to ask ourselves is, did Killua eventually find his purpose? And I would very much argue that he did, although it was not in Gon, but rather Aluka. By the end of Killua's involvement in Hunter x Hunter thus far, he has achieved a sense of peace within himself, and he has a solid grasp on what he wants to do with his life for the first time, which is to travel the world with Aluka and keep her safe from the grasp of their family. So it's a bit tricky because Killua's greatest driving force within the bulk of the series was certainly resolved, which is his relationship with Gon, and rather tragically resolved as well. I would equate Gon and Killua's relationship to that of an emotionally abusive partner. You know, Killua starts out the series and becomes a bit smitten with the old Gon, forming one of the most legendary partnerships in all of anime and manga, but as time goes on and on, it just becomes clear that Gon doesn't feel quite the same way. I've said it before, I'll say it now, and I will say it again, but Gon is an incredibly selfish protagonist who has no idea just how lucky he is to have a friend like Killua, who will dedicate himself entirely to ensuring that Gon is safe at all times. But how does Gon respond to that? Well, by putting himself in more and more danger, culminating in him being more than willing to throw his own life away for a completely meaningless mission in the slaughter of Neferpito. From Killua's perspective, it's like watching your partner walk down a path of self-destruction, and as much as you try to intervene, that's just what's going to inevitably happen. And in that scenario, you just need to separate yourself from that person, which Killua does. And in doing so, he probably achieves one of the happiest endings that any character in the series is going to be capable of getting. Not only does he leave Gon to pursue a greater purpose, but there's also the added benefit of Gon no longer being on that path to destruction. He loses his ability to invoke Nen, at least for the time being, and now he's safe and sound on Whale Island, where Killua doesn't need to worry about him. And that is significantly better than most of these types of relationships will end in real life, so good on you, Gon and Killua. But in that way, you could say that Killua's story in Hunter x Hunter came to a satisfactory conclusion, given that it was pretty directly tied to Gon's character arc. Killua found a new goal, and then he walked off into the sunset never to be seen again, except for when he was briefly seen again, recommending Bisky to Kurapika. But more importantly, Killua was finally able to achieve a solid sense of purpose in regards to Alluka, and while no, that isn't a tangible goal that one can really achieve, I do find it to be an unfortunately satisfying conclusion. Unfortunate because in my opinion, more Killua is never a bad thing in this world, but I will most certainly take an ending like this because it could have ended up significantly worse for him. And stepping into the more meta aspect of Hunter x Hunter for a second, we are also faced with the reality that we're on a very bad path ourselves at the moment, where Hunter x Hunter may never end, and if it does, it's probably going to be within the next arc or two. Togashi's age and frequency of output does not necessarily allow for us to put Killua back into the spotlight because we have enough loose ends to tie up without adding him back into the mix. So the way I tend to see things is that Gon and Killua are both done. It's not that we'll never see them again, but they won't be major protagonists, and what's left of this story is going to be dedicated to finishing off the characters of Kurapika, Leorio, and even Hisoka, probably Jing as well. Of course, that is just my opinion, and there are many ways that you could disagree with that, some of which we are about to explore, because if we do ignore Hunter x Hunter's publication issues, then there are indeed a variety of ways in which Killua could see a return as a protagonist, because not 100% of things regarding him have been solved, I suppose. The most obvious of which is his relationship with Illumi. When we last left these two, Illumi was scheming to figure out a method by which to control Killua so that he could by proxy control Alluka and thus have access to the greatest power ever showcased in this world. So one way that I could see a satisfactory return of Killua is to settle this conflict with Illumi, whether it be through combat or another means. And I guess it would be nice to have this come full circle because Illumi is Killua's ultimate antagonist really, and he has been the specter lurking over him for the large majority of Hunter x Hunter, so why not have him directly confront and overcome his brother? The question I will ask is it necessary though? I would argue no, but a lot of that mindset comes from knowing what Hunter x Hunter is as a series. If this was any other shonen series, I would say 100% that Killua needs to confront Illumi directly to have a satisfying ending. But this is Hunter x Hunter, and we cannot treat it like a typical shonen because plot points and foreshadowing are all frequently abandoned in favor of achieving a sense of realism within the world. And what I mean by that is that, sometimes in real life you just don't have your epic climactic conclusion because that's life. And Hunter x Hunter has made a point of invoking this realistic approach on a number of occasions. I mean, actually come to think of it, when has anything in Hunter x Hunter ever ended in that typical satisfactory manner that we would see in many other shonens? The closest I can come is Greed Island, where against all odds Gon did win the game through a fun last minute bit of trivia, but in every other arc things tend to end very suddenly and not in the way that they were set up to. And this is also the main argument that I would use against those who insist that Gon has to return because he has unfinished business with Hisoka, which is true, but in this world that's just not a good enough reason in my mind, and neither is Killua's unfinished business with Illumi. And to add to that, it's also entirely possible that Illumi will meet his own end during the current arc because he is aboard the Black Whale 1 and destined for a deadly date with Hisoka. So if Illumi is taken out during this arc, then well, that's all the more reason for Killua not to be brought back into the fold. There are still other arguments though, one of which is the gyro train of thought, and I have to say this every time, but look, if you're an anime only watcher, this will probably confuse you a bit because it was not included in the 2011 adaptation, but Gyro is a chimera ant who was stated by the narrator of Hunter x Hunter to have some sort of destined meeting with Gon in the future. And obviously that has not happened at this point, not even in the manga, but this serves as the main driving force behind the insistence that Gon's story isn't done, and there is a profound difference between dismissing this and dismissing something like I just stated before with the whole Hisoka rivalry, which is that Togashi made a narrative point to state that Gon and Gyro will meet. This isn't an implication of an event or the desire of a character expressed in speech, it was an inevitability stated by the narrator of the story, which is why I do take it a lot more seriously. But what does that have to do with old Killua? Well, it's because if there was any way to bring him back into the action, a call from his old flame Gon would certainly do just that. If Gon was ever in any trouble, I have no doubt that Killua would race at Godspeed to his rescue, and should we ever get to a stage where it is time for this Gyro and Gon business to actually play out, I guarantee you that Gon is probably going to be in a hell of a lot of trouble. But then again, thoughts along this line generally assume that we will ever get to, much less conclude, the Dark Continent, so this is very much a dream at this stage. But Killua could see a resurgence in other ways, because even removing Illumi from the equation, he is still a Zoldyck, and I highly doubt that Silver is just going to allow Killua to do whatever he wants for the rest of his life. I know this is going back an awfully long way, but one thought that does spring to mind is when Silver had that particularly sinister moment and claimed that Killua would return home as their heir one day, and regardless of how that occurs, be it peaceful or explosive or just downright murderous, that is another thread to maybe potentially solve. I mean, who else is the heir going to be? There's every chance that Illumi is going to be dead by the end of the current arc. Miliki is, well, he is in no way fit to be the head of such an organization. Carlito is, yeah. Carlito could probably do it after his experiences with the Phantom Troop. And of course, Alaka is directly tied to Killua. So Killua is very much the natural heir in this situation, but whether or not Togashi feels the need to tell that eventual story is completely up for grabs. Another one of those things that would be nice, but not absolutely necessary. But in essence, a lot of this is just very wishful thinking, and as stated, I myself have long since come to the conclusion that Killua's part in this story has long since ended. And as much as I love him, there is nothing wrong with that at all. Of all of our protagonists in the series, Killua has undergone the most heartbreaking journey, full of physical, mental, and emotional growth, becoming completely unrecognizable from the incarnation of him that we first met during the Hunter exam. I really don't think that one could ask too much more from a character who already exudes one of the most phenomenal presences in the entire manga medium. This boy has done his time, provided us with an exceptional journey, and laying it all to rest here is in no way a bad thing. But what do you guys think? Please do let me know down in the comments below, or even join my Discord server. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, then please do go and check out some of my other content, or even subscribe to the channel for regular Hunter x Hunter glory delivered straight into your YouTube feed. But for now, this has been the New World Review, and I'll see you next time.